Paul Ledman has an unusual way of giving directions. When planning to meet up with someone, he will often say, "Meet me where the clothing store used to be in 1844. Ledman takes that approach because he's passionate about the history of Portland, and he's written 2 books about its people, events, and especially its places.
I've always been curious about history. I've always enjoyed history very much, and I've always looked at history as part of a continuum. Understanding we are in the present today, really can't be done unless you've looked at the past.
In his books, Walking Through History, Portland, Maine on Foot, and Portland, Maine, Connections Across Time, Paul Ledman reveals the past through photographs. Here's the view from Congress Square, looking down Free Street as it was and as it is now. And one more, looking up at Monument Square then and the same view now. It's funny, I think that we all kind of carry 2 ideas around in our heads that are often in opposition. One is we understand that the world is always changing, but we get upset when we see that it is changing, that it's our neighborhood that's changing. And when you look at your book and see the photographs of what was in Portland and what is, you really get that sense of change.
Yeah, and people don't like change in general. No matter what you say, they're resistant to change, and that's a reality. And they also have a tendency to romanticize the past. So very often they'll say, oh, life in the old days, if it only this had been the same. They forget the downside. The good old days never were. And I think the books try to communicate that a bit.
One of the things that occurred to me as I was looking through the old photos from the horse-drawn cart era is what you don't see in those photos is all the horse manure that was in the streets.
The horse manure, the typhus, the dysentery, there's a lot of things you don't see that people forget.
On the other hand, you look back at those old photos and you see handsome buildings. They really are good-looking buildings, and you kind of can't help but say, gee, I wish we built buildings like that now.
Well, that's part of the whole concept behind the books. It's one thing to want to preserve the good things in the past, and it's another thing not to forget the bad things. And we have a tendency to say, gee, what a wonderful time that must have been. It wasn't. It really wasn't. I want to communicate that as well to people.
Among the grand buildings we've lost, City Hall Market in the Old Port, which stood on what is now Tommy's Park. And right across the street, the old post office on what is now Post Office Park. We're standing in Congress Square. There are a lot of photos in your books of Congress Square. When you just are here looking around, what runs through your head?
I sometimes look at the what used to be the Children's Museum, which is now the subject of a lot of discussion. And that was one of the only places that William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist, was allowed to talk about the evils of slavery in the 1830s. The change is constant. This handsome building on Congress Square was the YMCA. What you'll see there now is the Portland Museum of Art. You didn't grow up around here. No.
You didn't come here till you were an adult. Where does your passion for Portland history come from?
Well, I think it's a passion for history, and it's a passion for knowing where I am and where I live and knowing what's around me. And I'll see a building or a road or something that seems incongruous and say, how the heck did that ever happen? So I started looking into it. The old pictures show a downtown Portland bustling with people and commerce. It was a very different place before every family had a car, before suburbs and malls. The city was the center of life. People would come down here for entertainment, they'd come down here to go shopping. This was the center of everything. Something that we should all be grateful for, though, is how much of its old buildings Portland still has. And I think you can thank landmarks for that. Unfortunately, with the destruction of Union Station and the Grand Trunk Railroad Station, people started realizing the past was something to be preserved and not turned into highways and malls and so forth. This was Portland's magnificent Union Station, demolished in 1961. Here's what that location looks like now. A terrible trade-off, but one that did indeed ignite the city's still vigorous
historic preservation movement.
You've got a great idea of what this city looked like 100 years ago. What do you think this city is going to look like 100 years from now?
Oh, that is such a difficult question because you don't know which interest group is going to be more successful than the other interest group. You know, if you had asked me that question in the 1940s, I could never have imagined what urban renewal would have done to the city. So are we going back in that direction and we're going to say, wait a minute, we really need to have more of a livable city and more of a community and not just, you know, willy-nilly development, so we'll see.
With regards to transportation, maybe Portland will go back to the future with a 21st century trolley system.
It wouldn't be the old clanking trolleys that people have this vision of. It would be more modern, like you go to a place like Zurich or you go to places in France or Germany, and they're high-speed, gorgeous, fast, quiet. And, you know, the technology's out there. People are using it. So, you know, if we have the political will and, you know, lobbyists don't get in the way, there's no reason why we can't go back in that direction.
What you saw were just some of the many photos in Paul Ledman's two books. Again, the titles of those books are Walking Through History, Portland, Maine on Foot, and Portland, Maine, Connections Across Time.